So thus far, what we've been reflecting on is that we have this capacity for the awakened heart. It naturally gets shut down when we go into trance. It's not our fault, it just happens. And that this aspiration, should we practice it, will help us to be more aware of going into trance and more energized to be able to wake up from trance. That we care about it, that the trance itself is like a flag. Oh, okay, judging. How might this serve the awakening of my heart? How can I deepen attention? So once we recognize the suffering of trance, that helps us to become more alert. In other words, when we feel, oh, there's distance, I feel lonely, this keeps happening again and again in relationships, something's going on, that motivates us to deepen our attention. There's one friend of mine who for a number of years was volunteering and working at a hospice. And she described one woman that she got close to. This is a woman who had cancer and didn't have long to live. She had a large tumor on her tongue, so she could barely talk, but she loved to talk, which was difficult. This woman would come and they'd just be with each other. The company was very comforting. One day she returned. The woman was sitting on the edge of her bed, dressed and about to go home, and here's what had happened. This is a woman who's about to die. A few nights past, she'd had the worst nightmare of her life. And she dreamed that the staff at the hospice had told her she was next to die. She woke up at 4 a.m. in the morning, paralyzed with fear, saying, talking to God, no, why? I can't, this is not my time. And she was flooded with a sense of separation, not just from God, but from everybody in her life, and particularly from her husband. And then she got flooded with all the resentment she'd been carrying, that, ever since bringing up their children, that he wasn't doing enough, that, that in some way she always was trying to control him to be a different person. She always felt like he wasn't who he should be. So this is what came up to her in her dream, the sense of separation. So this is the suffering of the trance that she's realizing at the end of her life. And it was motivation to deepen her attention and feel this yearning to connect. So she said, it's not my time. I need to speak and I need to let him know I love him. So in the next 2 days, the tumor shrank. And she could leave. She had enough time to leave. And she went home and she could speak from her heart and name a lot of what was going on, her own fears and vulnerabilities and the pain that she now is experiencing by creating that kind of a distance and asking for forgiveness. And then she returned to the hospice and was able to die peacefully. To hold back our love is the deepest suffering. And that's what happens when we're in trance. So when we start feeling that suffering, we get motivated. And that vow, please may these patterns, whatever I'm in, may that awaken me, actually saves us time. We can, instead of being in that trance for decades, start really catching on and deepening our attention much more quickly. We don't have to wait till we're at the end of our life. So it begins with this aspiration, awakening bodhicitta. May whatever's happening serve. And then, in the remainder of this talk, we're going to explore 3 main training elements, 3 domains that we can cultivate if we really want to wake up our hearts. And the first domain is the simplicity of keep starting right where you are. I mentioned earlier the widening circles. You have to keep coming back to this circle and say, what's really going on right here, and can I open to it? We're not able to bring empathy to another person if we have not attended to what's right here, and we have to attend in an embodied way. The whole circuitry for compassion gets activated when we are kinesthetically inhabiting our body. If we're dissociated, then the compassion is mental. It's not wholehearted. Does that make sense? So the first step, start right where you are. And by that I mean come right into the body. Come in to touch the body fully. And then the circles can start widening. Then if we are real and in touch with our realness, others become real. The second part is to then purposefully look for what's true. What is going on in this other person? We don't look. We tend to, part of the trance we're in is that we're so caught up in what I'm feeling and I'm doing that there's a projection, but we don't really look at another with that interest of what's it like for you? What do you need? What are you feeling? What are you wanting? We don't check it out that way. So there's this training, a bodhisattva training, where in some way we're saying, just like me, I'm imagining that you feel vulnerable. Just like me, you too feel fear of failure. Just like me, you have a longing to connect and a fear about connecting. Just like me, you fear the loss of loved ones. There's that sense of just like me that's possible as we widen the circles when we really start looking at others. One friend described the West Coast, a kindergarten teacher was talking about her class, and this was at the time when the United States attacked Iraq. And the children heard about the Iraq war and that we were sending bombers over there. And they asked her, do they have children over there? And she said yes. And they got very agitated. They said, oh, well then they must not know. Those, the people in the bombers. They must not know that. We have to let them know. And so they went to the playground and they used these different materials to write out the word Iraq, and then and have a child's picture, so that the bombers that were flying overhead could see what they had made and understand. Oh no, you can't go bombing because there's children there. Just like me. So the training is really two-part. The training is to see the vulnerability in others, that just like our subjective experience, everybody is going around in this body that is out of our control. And it gets sick and it dies, and this heart that loses other beings, every one of us. So to be able to see that, just like me, and see who's there, and also to see the innate goodness, to see the potential, the wisdom and the tenderness and that longs for love in another being. I think of Chogyam Trungpa, a Tibetan teacher, whose one of his messages around compassion is never give up on anybody. To be able to see that goodness, even just to see the potential, no matter how buried it is. I read a story maybe a year and a half ago. It was really an editorial that Nicholas Kristof wrote that was based on an NPR story about Ollie Neal. He's an Arkansas Court of Appeals judge. And I was really struck by it as a bodhisattva story. I wanted to share it. So Kristof writes, in the late 1950s, Ollie Neal was a poor black kid with an attitude. And he remembers Ollie Neal reduced his English teacher, Mildred Grady, to tears. He was a regular shoplifter back then. He was kind of right on the edge, really, of kind of the fringe of being a delinquent. And so in the fall of his senior year, Neal cut class one day, and he wanders into the library where now his old English teacher, Grady, the one that he had kind of tormented when he was younger, was now working in the library. And Neil wasn't a reader, but he spotted a book by a little-known Black author, an adult novel. And he didn't want to check it out, so because he didn't want word to get out that, he was reading. So he stole it, took it under his jacket and stole it. And he really loved it. So he finished it and he went back into the library, and there on the shelf he noticed another novel by the same author. He stole that one also. The book was terrific. So then he returned to get yet another and found yet another was there. And it happened 4 times, and he caught the book bug, as he said. He said, reading got to be a thing I liked. His trajectory changed. He graduated to harder novels, Albert Camus, he turned to newspapers, magazines. He went to college and later law school. In 1991, he was appointed the first Black district prosecuting attorney in Arkansas, and a few years later he became a judge and then an appellate court judge. But there's more. At a high school reunion, Grady, the woman from the library, stunned him by confiding that she had spotted him stealing that first book. Her impulse was to confront him, but then in a flash of understanding, she realized he'd be embarrassed to be seen checking out a book. So she kept quiet. Not only did she keep quiet, she drove 70 miles to Memphis to search the bookshops for another title by that author. She found one, she brought it back, put it on the library bookshelf, and then twice more she spent her Saturdays trekking to Memphis to buy books by this author, all in the hopes of turning around this rude adolescent who had made her cry. She paid for the books herself. That's bodhicitta. That's the heart that is attuned and doesn't want to, understands embarrassment. It's the heart that sees potential goodness. It's that forgiving heart and that generous heart that really wants to bring out that goodness, which is really that the word blessing. When we're offered a blessing means in some way we're touched to become more who we are, to wake up our hearts, wake up our minds. She gave him a blessing. So the training to see the vulnerability and to see the goodness, because then we can respond. And as Trungpa teaches, we don't give up on somebody. And who knows, it's not like everybody before they die blossoms and becomes who we wish they'd be, but that's okay. You can't measure the impact of seeing goodness and seeing vulnerability and responding from that. It still ripples out in ways we don't know. Okay, so we're looking at the different trainings. The first training is to consciously have that vow, may this wake up my heart, whatever's happening. And then starting right where we are, being right with what's there. And then learning to look, to widen the circles by seeing the goodness and the vulnerability. And then to express ourselves from that place of seeing. To see what we see, to see the truth in another being, and to express our love in whatever way is going to be most helpful. Because each of us forget. Every one of us forgets our goodness and forgets that tenderness that's in there and needs reminding. One of my friends got reminded of this, a Buddhist teacher from Vancouver. His name's Brian Dean Williams, wonderful guy. He was at one of his first retreats some years back, and one guy in the retreat made him really, really uncomfortable. And this guy was wearing Nazi skinhead tattoos, and he didn't like his energy. He couldn't figure out what he was doing there. So at the end of the retreat, he's sitting down in the dining hall for the last meal, and this guy, of course, sits down right next to him as these things happen. Turns out his name's George Birdie, and he's the founder of a well-known neo-Nazi record label. So my friend, and they started talking about punk, because my friend had been involved with punk rock, but not neo-Nazi punk rock, different kind. But so my friend's still wondering, what on earth is he doing here? Because this guy's well known in certain circles. And so it turns out the guy told him that he had renounced Nazism. He now sits 3 retreats a year and so on. And the story, what happened was he went to jail. And while he was in jail, he talked to his mother. And she was in so much pain about his imprisonment and his life and where his life was going that she just started weeping for him. And her crying and her love, her sensing his vulnerability and his goodness and loving him through it all, he said, that's what got me, my mother's love. So his mom melted the armor around his heart just by crying and expressing her love. He described he's still getting death threats from people that considered him a traitor. And my friend Brian just found his heart. It's like he got to bear witness under the exterior to who this guy was emerging to become, flowering into being. Like this guy and what happened in jail, every one of us at different times are in the prison of trance. Every one of us needs to be reminded. Arne Garborg writes this. This is a Norwegian writer. To love someone is to learn the song in their heart and sing it back to them when they have forgotten. To love someone is to learn the song in their heart and sing it back to them when they have forgotten.